Jeff Yorga, President, Saskatchewan Stock Growers Association, located at Flintoft, Saskatchewan. Jeff, I enjoyed your write-up in the Beef Business magazine, particularly as it pertains to succession and people making decisions, especially if they don't have family members to pass a farm or a ranch to. Your views on that? Lots of people rail against very big farm operations, especially if they're not local. But your observation is that sometimes the people that rail against the mega farms are the ones that rent or sell out to the mega farms?
Well, first off, thanks for having me, Kevin. I appreciate the chance to flesh some of this out. When you write a column, you don't know what people are going to pick up on, and I've wanted to touch on all of these topics for some time, and they just all happen to hit the same column. And so, first off, I really want to try to get cattle producers to start having a conversation around succession planning. For whatever reason, it's happened in the grain industry for a long time. I think that's more a function of the historical profitability of that business versus the cow-calf business. But what we're seeing an aging demographic in the livestock industry. Because of that, there's fewer and fewer people there to either take over those operations or to purchase and expand into some of these larger ones. And so, my intention was to get people to start thinking about it, try to think creatively around it, and think, specifically about what type of an industry and what type of a community do they want to leave behind. Oftentimes that the conversation comes down to, how much money can I get as fast as I can get it when it's time to retire, as opposed to thinking a little harder about, who's going to support the rink when I'm not there. Who's going to go to the community events when I'm not there, and who do I want to be working this land when I'm not there. And given a lot of little extra thought to that, I think allows people to have perhaps a more positive conversation around succession planning than what it often boils down to is just how can I get the most money the fastest. And that's maybe the second part of your question, and it's something I alluded to in the article was I've had producers sit down across from me here, and we've talked for hours about I guess what in their mind the negatives of the mega farm, right? And at the end of the conversation, I've asked them, what is your plan when you're going to retire? And to a T, their answer is we're selling it to the highest bidder. We don't care who that is. We're taking the most money possible. And so it's a real challenge to have a policy conversation with somebody when their outcome is going to be what they're railing against. And so, my intention was to start the conversation in the livestock industry. Hopefully, we can pull at some threads, provide some tools for producers who may be in a bind or don't feel as confident as perhaps I do on the topic, and see if we can help some people. And ultimately we want to have an industry that's growing. We want an industry that young people want to come back to, and that's what we're working towards every day when we're having policy discussions. But bigger picture, we need we need the people to come back. If we're going to be successful, we need them to come back. And so part of it is having this conversation and seeing if we can't get the next generation more involved.
Now, I'm a grain guy. I work together with some neighboring cattle operations. But one thing that I'm always amazed at is how when farms are up for sale, oftentimes it's entire big block of land rather than the ability for other producers to buy smaller portions of that. And to me, that biases it to large operations, biases it to outside operations, rather than perhaps selling to a number of neighbors or a number of younger producers that could bite off smaller chunks.
Yeah, that's definitely one way of skinning the cat, and that's again the intention here. Succession planning doesn't happen in an afternoon, right? And retirement doesn't happen in an afternoon. And what it seems like when you have those, big land sales or a big chunk go up is that a lot of thought wasn't given to it, right? And so when you take when you take a little bit more time and you're able to, sit back with a cup of coffee and really think about what you want to do, options like what you suggested, I think, become a lot more palatable to people. Whether it's splitting it up to give some of the neighbors a chance, whether it's um, funding it yourself to give a younger person a chance. Now, that gets people's back up, right? And that's not exactly what I mean when funding it yourself doesn't mean giving somebody the money or giving it to somebody, but allowing them to buy smaller portions over time to fund your retirement, right? One of the things that in the cattle industry, producers that have been in it for a long time are used to living day to day, right? They get paid generally once a year, and they can stretch that money for a long time. And so, most of these producers who are exiting now, they're not exiting to go buy a house on the beach in Mexico, right? They're exiting, and they're going to perhaps move to town. They're not going very far. And oftentimes they don't even want to leave the house that they're in. They just can't do the work anymore. And so, getting creative with these folks is a real opportunity for a younger generation. And I say younger, I'm 44 and I'm part of the young generation, right? And when I say younger, I mean significantly younger than me, to give people that opportunity to come back.
Do you think it's maybe less easy for a livestock producer, a cattle producer, to take less than top dollar than it might be for many retiring grain producers?
Well, and I think that's a bit of a misnomer. I'm not suggesting that a producer doesn't take top dollar. What I'm suggesting is that take top dollar, but give the younger person the opportunity to do it, right? Or do it in a creative way so that that top dollar gets paid to you over a period of time, or something different, right? Let's look at it different, instead of just saying I need the most money possible and I need it all in my bank account today. There's ways of setting things up with the lawyer to make sure that you're protected, to make sure that you're being paid, and to make sure, and in some cases, the tax consequences are better if you're taking that money over time than if you're taking it all on day one.
No, I think those are excellent comments. The difficulty in the cattle industry to attract younger entrants, the grain industry is so mechanized, and it's relatively easy to farm bigger acres with bigger equipment. But the cattle industry, when you're processing cattle, you're still running them through the chute one at a time, and it takes labor, it takes person power. How difficult will it be to attract younger entrants into the cattle industry as we move forward?
I think the biggest barrier right now, Kevin, isn't actually manpower. It's a lack of a feasible business risk management solution. Right now, if you go to the bank and you want to borrow $10 million to go, and not that people can just go do that, right? But to put a number on it, but say you want to go borrow $1 million to go buy grain land, the bank looks at it, and a condition of the loan will be crop insurance, because they know that you can at least get your inputs back and you could try again next year. When I go in to buy cows or buy ranch land, first, they're going to laugh at me. Second, they're going to say, how are you going to protect this? And the truth is, there's no way for me to do that. And so as a young person who's, might be, in their early, let's say they're in their 20s, and they're looking at a 25-year mortgage, the bank has no way of protecting themselves. And so the odds of them getting the mortgage aren't very good. And the odds of, the odds of them being able to carry it all the way out without having a bad year aren't very good either, right? And so because the margins historically in the cow business have been so thin, there aren't a lot of producers that are paying these land notes off early in the cow business. Now in the grain business, that's been different. There's been a 25-year historic commodity boom that has now seemed to pull back a little bit, but it's been a big run. And producers have had that opportunity to take profits and fix their balance sheets. We don't have that in the cow calf business, in the cattle business in general. And so until we're able to build significant business risk management tools that allow producers to go to the bank and say, look, the worst I can do is pay you back, right? If the worst I can do is pay you back, then the bank's going to be happy to deal with us in the same way that they're happy to deal with a grain producer.
Jeff Yorga, very interesting comments. Thanks very much for chatting.
Thanks for your time, Kevin.